And so when you get better, you get more experienced, you then understand. Ultimately, that's what it comes down to. Is it's less about luck and more about, you might get a lot of people to meet you, but then you end up with a lot of deals that don't really close, in which case you need to focus on. And a good way to identify those bottlenecks is,
how do you create someone that's elite and not just great, and how do you know when you're elite?
so a good example of somebody who is elite is in that will then tell you, okay, there's something wrong at this step. And I remember picking up the pen, which is now a bit of a cliche. In 2008, I was like, okay, well that's...
And if you don't have any followers or any type of platform to start off with, how would you get from 0 to the first, say, 1,000 followers?
The big thing I'd like to share with people is...
Hi everyone, we're here with Paul M. Caffrey today on The Scene. Paul, it's an honor to have you here. First off, just can you tell me a little bit about yourself and what type of industry you're in for anyone who hasn't heard of you before?
Yeah, look, thanks for having me on, Kaya. And for people who haven't heard of me, I work with sales teams, sales leaders, helping salespeople operate at an elite level. And so that takes me to different places, which is great. And what I've noticed over the years is everybody has the ambition to be a top performer, particularly if they're working in sales. But a lot of the times they don't know how to do that. And so what I do is deconstruct what top performers do to allow everybody else to be prepared so that they can actually do the right things, do the things that work, as opposed to spend months, sometimes even years, figuring out what doesn't work before they stumble across what does.
And how did you get into the sales world? Because from what I believe, you started in the science world and your parents were in the science world, and then you transitioned and did an MBA, and now you're in sales.
Yeah, it was a real whirlwind. And the reason I qualified in science and I started working in the industry, but I didn't enjoy it. I was doing research science, and the way it works is there's 8 of you in a research lab, and 2 people are going to make a groundbreaking discovery and become world famous and have great careers. The other 5 or 6 won't, but they would get a master's or they'd get their PhD. So it's not for nothing, but there was a lot of people who were very unhappy that someone was going to be really successful, others weren't. And it didn't come down to who was a better scientist. It came down to whose project or whose science was actually going to yield results, which you don't really have any control of that in the beginning. But off the back of that, there wasn't a real attitude of helping or collaboration. And that kind of put me off the industry. And look, I was young at the time, maybe a bit naive, so I decided to move to London and then pursue a career in sales, having left the industry. Yeah, I don't regret it. Do I miss science? A little bit. But I'm pretty happy I made the move.
How would you say that differs to sales, though? Because I think some people would look at sales and go, yeah, it's a bit of a luck game as well, like the same as science. Like you can put in all the preparation, but ultimately a client might just go, yeah, not for us.
Yeah, and ultimately that's what it comes down to is understanding if you can help the client and if that help is actually needed, if it's merited. What is nice is you can figure out who you can help very early on and who they might have a problem, you might be able to solve it, but solving that problem mightn't really impact them or their business that much. So when you get better, you get more experienced, you then understand who is going to have who's going to achieve the biggest outcome, who you're going to have the biggest impact on, and then you can focus your time on the people that you can truly help, as opposed to those who, have a problem, but they don't really need what you're selling. And that comes with experience, because a lot of the time we hear someone has a problem, I've got a solution, and we're off trying to sell to them, but really it's the impact of the solution that we want to understand and ascertain. And that in itself, it's less about luck and more about skill. So sales is a combination of numbers, a numbers game and a skills game. You can be very lowly skilled in sales, but if you do a huge amount of outreach, if you speak to a huge amount of clients, you'll get business. Equally, it goes the other way. You could be really, really skilled and amazing at sales, but if you don't put the numbers in, you're really going to struggle. So it's finding that balance, and that's what people can control.
What would you say, like going off of that point, is better to focus on? Because I think in sales, a lot of the time, people say you just have to get a lot of no's and just accept that. Do you think it's better to try to decrease the ratio of no's that you get, or just try to focus on getting as many answers as you can, then you'll find that there's a couple of yeses?
The answer is, it depends, right? So if you're starting out early in your entrepreneurial journey and you're looking to sell something, you might need to validate if your product or if your idea is any good. In which case, then it's have as many conversations as you can, then looking for feedback, getting people's thoughts on that, and then seeing if you have a product and if someone would actually pay something. And typically they might use what you have for free, but would they pay something for it? And then is it any good? So you want to really make sure that you're delivering and you're over delivering on your service. However, if you're working for an established company or you've got an established product which you are selling, in that case, then it really is about just doubling down on your skills and looking to improve your pipeline generation and how you progress deals throughout a sales cycle. And ultimately, you'll see the constraints, you'll see the bottlenecks. You might not have many deals to work on, which means you need to work on pipeline generation. You might get a lot of people to meet you, but then you end up with a lot of deals that don't really close, in which case you need to focus on qualification. And there's a lot of steps all the way throughout that process that you can identify. This is now a bottleneck. How do I go and improve that? But it really varies depending on where you are and what you're selling, and how mature the product is that you're selling itself.
And just generally, how do you identify those bottlenecks and know when is a good time to stop and when is a good time just to keep going and push through?
You'll see it in your pipeline, and a good way to identify those bottlenecks is if it's somebody who's in a sales process or it's someone that you're looking to sell to. Where do they tend to go quiet? Where does the excitement and the anticipation and the enthusiasm then start to wane? And that will then tell you, okay, there's something wrong at this step. So before that, something has gone wrong. So for example, you've got this cool idea, you're an entrepreneur, people are very happy to meet you, but then you go meet them and you just talk about yourself and what this idea is going to do and how it's going to save the world. But people meet you because they've got a problem and they think you might be able to help them solve that. So if you don't speak to them about what they need, what their problem is, what they're doing, you'd end up maybe showing them or giving them a demo of what you're selling. And then a lot of people wouldn't get back to you. So in that case, then if you've a lot of people not getting back to you, you're probably not defining the problem well enough with the client, or the solution is probably not worthwhile for them to go and fix. Whereas if you're having trouble building pipeline, well, maybe it can be a numbers game, because if you're only reaching out to one or two people, it's going to be very hard to get a meeting. So it could be maybe 20 people a day is who we should be reaching out to. Or it's a case of everybody's replying to your messaging and they're not really interested. Maybe we need to change the message a little bit. So it's wherever that blocker is, and then doing A/B testing as much as you can.
Right, so kind of identifying where it is that people stop engaging with your sales and then trying to fix that along the way.
Yeah, precisely.
And you said earlier something about creating elite salespeople. How do you create someone that's elite and not just great? And how do you know when you're elite?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and one that I don't get asked too often. So fair play. What it comes down to is we can now see by the numbers if someone is operating at an elite level, and what's a good measure on that is how they manage and how they run their deals and how they run their business. So a good example of somebody who is elite is in the first or second conversation, they say no to their clients. In fact, the amount of deals which top salespeople close lost at the start is 3, 4, 5 times higher than anybody else. But what it does mean is if the deal moves to the next step in the sales process, that the close rates are exceptionally high. So from from an analysis or just from a data perspective, where people part ways with clients, that then gives us an idea if they're operating at an elite level. Whereas most will have just a big pipeline, and then it will gradually, deals will fall off, and then there'll be a steep decline at the end because a lot of people just will say no to the offer. And when it comes down to each of the steps in the sales process, there are key things that you can look at and that you can score people on to see, are they elite? Are they good? Or are they poor? And could they do it getting better? So if we take a first call or a discovery call, we're really trying to figure out if we can help somebody. We can look at, well, how have they prepared for that conversation? How well have they qualified the ability to help? Have they done any active listening in it? How well were their questions structured? What were their next steps? Were they clear? Did they ask for next steps? And then there's a few more things that we can delve into, but you can really look at scoring it along those lines. And it's the same for all of the different stages. So people are then able to see how they're doing. And with all of these great tools out there, a lot of the conversations, we can actually analyze that and see that now for people.
And do you think if someone's trying to grow as a person, as an entrepreneur, and become an elite person, can they analyze that about themselves, or is it hard to see? They need to be an outsider kind of looking in?
You can analyze it for yourselves, but you have to be aware and you have to be prepared to record, to make notes and to record calls when you can. I was speaking to a client today and they have all of the software to record their calls. They meet their customers on Zoom primarily, but they weren't doing it because they didn't want to watch themselves back. They didn't want to see themselves asking those questions. That's where it gets a little bit difficult when you're doing it for yourself, because there is that cringe feeling. But if you are objective, you absolutely can. And then you can take those transcripts, put them into the likes of ChatGPT and score them against the criteria that's important for you to be a top performer. Big thing for people to take away though is this all sounds very complicated, and it can get complicated when we're talking about complex sales cycles in large organizations. But the best thing people can do is be prepared for their meetings. So if you're going to meet somebody, within the first few seconds, they're going to judge you. Is this a safe person? Is this a person who is cool to be around? Like it or not, we all judge everybody. Our fight or flight kicks in. And when someone meets somebody who's selling to them, they're putting them into a box of, oh, another boring salesperson, or someone who's really interesting I'd like to do business with. But they're doing that within the first 7 seconds up to 1 minute. If you prepare, if you share with them something that you weren't expecting them to know, you grab their attention. So much like you did at the start of this podcast, Kaya, you mentioned my science background. I can count on one hand the amount of people who speak to me about my science background because it's so long ago. So I can see that you've put the work in, you've done that bit of preparation, and then it just gets the conversation off to a great start. That is probably the biggest thing people can do, because then the rest of your questions can be the same, but you'll get better answers because people are engaged and they'll see the other person is very serious. They've paid me respect in the form of preparation. And that is something that anybody can do, no matter their level.
And do you think there's a thing as too much preparation? Like there's a point where you're just over preparing to the point of procrastination?
Yes, I recommend 25% of your time is spent on preparation. So if you're meeting somebody for an hour, put 15 minutes aside, go and do some preparation on them. What do you do with that preparation? Look at the individual, look at the business, even look at the industry. And then you can think about 3 lenses of what's happened before, what's going on at the moment, what might be happening in the future. And that in itself will stop you from maybe spending a day, 2 days, 4 days preparing. And depending on how important something is for you, you might put a bit more preparation in. But the big thing I think is people just don't know how to prepare. And that's where they make the mistake. They might set the time aside and then they just waste it.
And how do you think you can prepare like most effectively?
Well, I think most effectively is thinking about how are you going to open that that meeting. So how am I going to show them I know them, that I've understood a little bit about their business? And then the next thing is thinking about what is the ideal outcome that I'd like to achieve? What are all the other possible outcomes? And preparing next steps. So if you're going in to sell something to somebody, if we want to figure out if it's a fit for them and if it will actually help them. And if we've done that, well, what would the next step be? And the next step really breaks down into 4 components. It's going to be, okay, I think that we should meet next Thursday. So you name a time. I think myself, yourself, maybe the technical team get involved. So you mentioned who's there, and we should do an analysis of your current infrastructure or whatever that reason is for you to meet, or maybe it's we can give you a demo of the platform and show you this in progress. And then the final piece is, and the reason we're doing this is because, and if it's a technical analysis, because we want to make sure that we can actually deliver. If it's a demo, we want to show you how easy this is, or we want to show you how it's going to fix your solution. It's going to fix your current pain points. They are the 2 best parts of preparation. So making sure you get the start off, you know how to start really strongly, and you know what you're going towards. Now, your prepared next steps, sometimes your meeting goes well and you ask for them. Other times you realize it's a waste of time for me to deliver a demo, and then you share with them, well, I would normally recommend we go to a demo next, but because of X, Y, or Z, I think there's maybe no need for that, or that's something that we don't need to go for. So from that perspective, then they're the 2 most important parts of preparation. The conversation in the middle generally takes care of itself. That generally gets better over time. But the start and finish is where most people, they just overlook it, and it's incredibly important.
And do you think there's a way to deliver a really strong start or a really strong finish that can be applicable to kind of any type of company that you have? Or is it just more personable?
It comes down to really being able to think about the problem that that you think they have, or you know they have, and how you think you might be able to help them. And what can make a start or a finish a little bit more powerful, on top of what we've already mentioned about showing somebody that you know them or talking about the next steps, is then being able to outline how other people have been helped by this. So if we're looking at when we're starting things off, we share something about them and their business that they didn't know, and we're guessing that this is a problem for them. We're looking forward to finding out a little bit more. And also it turns out that said person in the same industry, we've worked with them and they've achieved X, Y, or Z. That then kind of gets them a little bit more engaged. And then also when you're talking about your next steps at the end, these are the next steps I'm recommending because our most successful clients followed these steps, followed this process, and they were able to achieve X, Y, and Z. So that's where you can add a little bit more onto it. If you've got some good clients that you can refer to, or your company maybe has done some business in an industry or in a field before.
And this is a lot kind of what you talk about in your book, The Work Before the Work with Phil M. Jones. In that book, you go through the 6 type of principles or frameworks that can help someone prepare before they have the actual sales call. Can you go through that with us quickly?
Yeah, certainly. So what it comes down to is top sales performers have these habits, and they're hidden habits because even top performers don't realize they're doing them themselves. And what it comes down to is no matter if it's a big meeting or if it's an unexpected meeting at a conference or something that's impromptu, they're always thinking about the other person, and they're really looking to ask themselves, what's that other person looking to achieve? How are they going to achieve that? And they also think about the same questions for themselves. And this then puts them into a position of, instead of just having random conversation or just following a pretty boring demo or a boring discovery call, they're then putting what the other person needs at the center of it. And this then turns these conversations into something which has a lot more energy, has a lot more purpose behind it. And depending on how big that is for you, the top performers go a little bit deeper. So if it's a bigger opportunity, they're then thinking about, well, what is the current situation here? Have I been invited in? Is it a case that I've sent a lot of messages and managed to get in through being persistent? And then there's different levels to that. And off the back of that, then it's thinking about what's the decision-making process. That's in the micro. So what decision needs to be made in this meeting to go to the next step? In the macro, how is somebody going to decide to invest in your solution? And from there, they're thinking about, how am I going to progress this and how will I track progress? And again, it's really about a thinking framework of preparation that allows you to make the most of the opportunities that come into your world and the most of the opportunities that you go out and find. And like everything, depending on how important it is, depends on the amount of effort that you put into it.
And do you think those frameworks are applicable to any situation, or especially as our world is growing and AI is starting to become a bigger part of it, do you think that changes or it's just the same?
I think the expectations is that more and more people don't have an excuse for not being prepared anymore. So these frameworks, they're a thinking framework, and there's frameworks for how to actually show up and how to be in meetings. And AI is the tool that helps us do that a little bit better. And it's incredible. I mean, there are some prompts out there that you can use which are mind-blowing. So for example, if you are meeting somebody, you can put a prompt in saying, I'm meeting Lawrence and this is his company, this is what he does. Act like a researcher. I'm looking to discuss X, Y, and Z solution, and find me a needle in a haystack. Find me something that is really interesting. Find me an unexpected piece of information that I can share with him to show that I'm very keen for us to work together. These sorts of prompts now will throw you amazing information, and then you can go and start off your meeting with something which they're not expecting to hear, and then grab attention. And if you think about all the rest of the sales process, people are just now, the standards are just going to rise, because what would have taken, let's say 20 minutes or hours or even a day or so can be done in seconds. So what you're going to see is the salespeople who use AI are the ones who are going to be more successful. And interestingly, what we have seen to come out in a recent study is that salespeople who are using AI are able to spend nearly 4 hours a day speaking with customers. Salespeople who aren't really using it that well are only speaking to customers about 2 hours a day. And then the results are showing that if you speak to your customers more, you close more business, you help more people. That is where AI is really there. It's really there to help and support. And it's probably going to be needed in sales for anything where we kind of talk about mid-market sales and upwards, which is typically maybe a spend of, let's say, $10,000, $20,000 and above, is always going to involve people. I say always, looks like it's going to involve people for, let's say the next 10, 20 years or so. Anything below that, it's potentially at risk of massive disruption. So there is going to be change for sure.
And is there any particular, going off the points of prompts, like being very specific and going, think like this type of person, and when you're giving it a lot of details, is there any particular prompt that you use to help prepare for meetings or calls?
The prompts really vary, and what I found works quite well is just being really clear when you're prompting. So saying, I want to prepare to meet this person or this type of persona. Then the next line, the meeting is to discuss X, Y, or Z. I want you to act like a researcher who is preparing a dossier or a document for this meeting. And I want the format to be delivered in 20 bullet points. And I want sources to be shared as well, links to sites. That sort of structure seems to work quite well, where you're really talking about what you're going to be doing, the format that you would like to receive the content back in, what you would like the AI to act like, what sort of person you would like them to be. And just that structure itself is quite good. The other one, which is a prompt I've used that I really like, is, if you were the devil, what would you tell me to do to make sure that I missed my sales target this year?
That's a good one.
For some reason, the negative ones seem to work quite well. And then you just do the opposite, and AI will prompt you to, would you like a positive version of this? And you can change what you're doing.
That's cool. Have you found any AI tools in particular work really well with this, or just like ChatGPT or Claude?
I used the paid version of ChatGPT. Seems pretty good. I've also used Claude. ChatGPT is the one that I'm using most, probably just because it was the one that I signed up for first. I've played around with DeepSeek and a few others. They all seem pretty good. I haven't seen one which really stands out above others. There are some then niche GPTs or niche tools that are coming along. Quite excited for that space, because I think the sales industry is ripe for disruption, and there's a lot of players there. None have stood out and really taken that mantle yet, but I definitely think someone's going to come along and own that industry from an AI perspective.
So if you're an entrepreneur going into the sales space, what type of those opportunities do you think, or do you encounter on like a daily basis?
It's like anything. It's thinking about what are the problems people are having and what's the value of solving those problems for people. A lot are spending their time at the top of the funnel, and they're automating at this level. I think that space is overcrowded. I think there's a lot of people there. I think towards the middle or towards the end of a sales process, there's probably more opportunity to create something, simply for the fact that this end of the funnel is technically more valuable, and this is where a lot of time is also spent. And that could be around the case of automating business cases. It could be around improving how quotes are being sent. It could be around automating the bill of materials that go into that. I think that part there is probably a good area to focus on. However, it's about finding out what people need. So it's like anything. Go out, speak with people, see what their problems are, see what their pains are, and then go from there.
And you've worked with a big scale of people, from really big companies to startups. How have you found that like big companies like Microsoft differ from startups? Is there anything that they do differently that you could apply to your own business?
Yeah, the big difference between the bigger companies and the smaller startups is the bigger companies, they have standard operating procedures. They're very, very clear on who does what when, whereas the smaller companies that are scaling, they might have 5 or 10 people, they might have 150 people, but they tend to be quite disorganized. So from a sales perspective, Microsoft would have a very clear sales process, and they would move people through a sales process. If they're hiring, they've got a very clearly defined hiring process. They define the type of people that they're after. They understand the skills and experience and traits that they want. And then they would have a very structured interview process. We're going to test competency here. We're going to do a chronological interview and talk about experience and what they've done before. And we're going to have scorecards. We're going to have multiple people speaking with hires. Whereas smaller companies, oh, you worked for Microsoft. You worked at Salesforce. Come on in, and this is amazing. This is exactly what we wanted. However, that can sometimes be a recipe for disaster, because if you take someone who's worked at a bigger company and you put them into a smaller company, all of a sudden you don't have the marketing support. You don't have that sales support. You have to do a lot of stuff yourself. And that then causes issues. So that halo effect of working in a big organization and a smaller organization causes challenges. And this is echoed throughout the organizations. What is exciting if you're looking to start out your career, if you are entrepreneurial and you think that I would like to start my own business, personally, I think it's really worthwhile going to find a smaller company that is scaling, where you get to see a lot of everything that's going on and you've got access to the founder or the person who is running the company. So you get to see what the sales is like, what the marketing is like. You get to understand the headaches that come along when perhaps you're trying to scale, as opposed to if you then, you know that you want to work in a certain field, you know that you want to, focus on a certain profession, you know that you're not really too interested in starting your own company. I think then it's worthwhile going into the bigger organizations, because you will get more structured training, you will get great experience, and then you'll get a lot of opportunities that will come along simply because you've worked at a big company. But look, everyone has to go on their own adventure as well. So it's really just a case of picking what's best for you.
And do you think those operating procedures, are those what makes a company successful, or it's just as you scale, they just kind of naturally help you become a good company?
I think they make companies scale. I think people knowing what they should do, who should do what, that makes a big impact. So for the companies that are scaling, they're the ones that I see would have standard operating procedures throughout. Whereas a lot of big companies that are quite stable, they sometimes don't tend to have them as much. So when it comes to growth, that's where SOPs or standard operating procedures come in. And this is something that anybody can do at all levels, even if you're operating as an entrepreneur or a solopreneur. How do you post on social media? What sort of content? What is your tone? Is it images? Is it video? How do you reach out to clients? Is it I send direct messages? Do I send email? Do I make phone calls? Do I knock doors? Like, some people still do that. The reason this is so useful is the second you get a few more customers and you realize I've got too many here to work with, you can then get somebody in to help you. And it's not you telling them all the time, it's you giving them a document to follow, showing them once or twice, and if they get stuck, they then follow that document. And that's where these bigger companies can scale faster, because you don't have to bring in a salesperson and have them figure out how to sell the product. They just have to follow the process that's proven that works, and that is really, really powerful.
And you mentioned Microsoft a bit earlier. When I was doing my research, I found that there was something about you helping grow Microsoft 365 a couple of years back and growing it from 0 to 100,000 users. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it was quite an exciting times. Microsoft Office 365, basically everybody used to have their email and all their documents and everything stored on local servers and on local computers. And around 2007, they started putting it in the cloud. So they launched Office 365 in 2011. So in the Irish market, I was involved in selling that. I was part of the sales team selling that. And then we moved, I got the opportunity to go to the UK in 2013 and help a telecommunications provider go from 0 to 100,000 users of Office 365 over a 4-year period. And that was really fun, because we were selling to small office, home office users who might only need 2 or 3 licenses, but also to big organizations who might have 5, 10, 15,000 people working there. And both were very, very different, but the technology had just matured to a point where it could serve that broad range. And at that point, I got to have the great opportunity to be coaching and getting a lot of people to sell in a lot of different markets the solution that they weren't used to. And in particular for clients, it's a case of, well, email in the cloud or email locally. It kind of just doesn't stack up. Why would I do that? Why would I not? So you really had to get really good discovery done. You really had to uncover, sometimes hidden pain points that they weren't aware that they had. And off the back of that, because we were able to follow a really great sales process, we were in the position of being able to get a lot of people to move onto the platform. So yeah, it was a really fun time, and hard to believe it's so long ago now, really.
And more specifically as well, how did you, because that's quite a new technology, how did you break down those barriers or those biases that people would have had about new technologies and get them to switch over to a completely different platform?
Yeah, and I used to get some great objections thrown at me. So, I mean, the phrase was coined cloud computing. And I remember sitting in an office one day giving a presentation, and someone looks out the window and goes, "Yeah, but what if that cloud blows away? Where's all my info gone?" And I was like, ha, 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 very funny. And then the person was serious. I was like, oh my God. So from there, it's really just being able to have simple metaphors that could explain it, and then calling out how the initial fears around security, and that was the big one, how secure is the cloud? And I remember meeting a client, and they had their medical records, and like, their medical records for their patients, very sensitive information. Information isn't always that level of sensitivity, but they're like, well, how secure is this cloud? And you're like, well, it's in a data center. It's geographically dispersed backup locations. There's armed guards that are there. So you're kind of going through that, really, informing them. And then there's a case of, so where is yours stored? It's in the other room here. Okay, and this place is prone to floods. Okay, this has been flooded before. In that case, is your data safer here or somewhere else? In fact, there is no security. Somebody could break a window, come in and actually physically take away your data. So a lot of the times it was just down to opening people's eyes to what they're actually doing at the moment and what the service would do for them, and then having them make their mind up. Do they think that they were safer keeping it here or moving it up to the cloud?
How did you discover those pain points? Because in that case, they kind of presented them to you. But in cases where they might not be so clear, how do you find what it is a person is really scared of and that might not be stopping a sale?
Yeah, it's a really, really nice question, a really advanced question as well. So fair play for asking it, Kaya. It comes down to giving people space to have objections. A lot of the time, we have a great conversation. We're really positive. We just want to move on to the next step. But if we stop and pause, we can insert space for those objections or those hidden objections to surface. And simply asking, is there anything that we haven't discussed that's important to you? And giving a bit of space. Is there anything preventing you from potentially moving forward? And again, giving a level of space. And what doubts have you got about this versus what you're doing at the moment? And again, people feel like, I shouldn't ask negative questions because everything's going so well. But to your point, you get those hidden objections if you give people space. And the earlier you uncover those objections, the more successful you'll be. That's another one of the things I didn't mention earlier on, that we look at. If an objection is raised at the start of the sales process, you have a much higher likelihood of closing the deal versus if it's raised at the end.
That's interesting. So it's kind of quite counterintuitive to what most people would think, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you'll find is if you're not sure if your solution can help the other person, you can say that. You can call it unselling. There's a lot of different words out there for it, but simply calling out that this will help you a bit, but I don't think this will help you enough to justify your time or putting your resources towards it. So I don't think we should move forward with it. And then if you're taking something away from somebody and they then tend to go, no, I really do need it. And the reason I need it is X, Y, or Z, because sometimes people don't give you all the information because they think if I give all the information, this person's going to charge me top dollar. If I act like it's only going to help me a little bit, they might discount and give it to me a bit cheaper. But if you're looking to then take it away, then you find out if there's something that you can really help with or not. And a lot of people think business cases are for customers or prospects to make decisions. A lot of the time they are. It is the logic that is needed to justify why you would proceed. But the top salespeople are creating business cases for themselves at the start to justify if it's worth their own time. So is there enough of a change that's going to happen here that's worth my time to go on and do it?
How do you know when being honest is almost too much honesty? Like, you want to build relationships with your consumers, but you also want to move them along to saying yes to whatever you're trying to sell them.
I kind of don't think there is a such thing as too much honesty. I think we should be completely honest. And I think that's one of the things which has changed over the years, that the best sellers are no longer the most charming, the ones with the biggest personalities. They're the ones that will take the time, listen, get to understand the person that they're speaking with and see if they can genuinely help them or not. And if there is some reason why they shouldn't proceed, they will tell them. And there was plenty of times when I had people saying, I want to buy the Microsoft technology from you. It seems amazing. And I've had to say, your internet, it's maybe not strong enough. It's strong today, but your signal is not great. It could be down tomorrow, in which case it would be a bad experience. This is not the right time for you. In a year or two's time, when your infrastructure is better, then that is something to go for, as opposed to just taking the deal and then having an unhappy customer, because the world is smaller than you think, and that follows you around. I think that honesty and that transparency is really, really key, and the more of it, the better. And you're in a bit more trust that way. As regards getting people to say yes, we want them saying, yes, I really need this solution because I have this problem, and that's why I need it. And if they are saying yes and they've got a compelling reason behind it, then it's something to move forward with. But if you know that there's a problem in the background, you need to say it. And there were some times when I'd turn around and I'd said that with people, and then they turn around, okay, well, can you provide me with some high-speed internet? And I'd be like, well, my company doesn't sell that, but this other company, I'm sure they will. I know they're good. And then they end up with your service, but they then have a good experience. So I suppose that things have changed a little bit over the last few years for sure.
And I think that helps make you become seen as like a trustworthy person or a trustworthy provider as well, which is really important.
Yeah, no, totally. And that follows you around. And there's plenty of times when I speak at sales kickoffs where I'll call out that I'm maybe not the best speaker for this particular topic, and I'll introduce them to somebody else who is, and then they'll be very happy with that. And then it swings and roundabouts. So then you'll get an introduction from somebody else to a job that you are really made to deliver on, as opposed to just trying to do a lot of things okay instead of doing a few things really well.
There's actually an interesting story I came along when doing some research on you, where you went to a group interview and you sold a pen.
Wow, it's quite interesting, and I'm curious on how you even came across that. So yeah, I remember going into my first technology interview, and they basically gave us a box of computers, laptops, fancy phones, and this is 2007, 2008, and you had to stand up in front of everybody and sell. And I was still a scientist technically at this moment because I hadn't actually worked in sales. And I remember picking up the pen, which is now a bit of a cliche, because we have had it has been used in, I guess, the likes of the Wolf of Wall Street and some of these other places. But in 2008, I was like, okay, well, that's an easier thing for me to pick up because I can understand if somebody needs it. I can then build a reason for them to go ahead with it, as opposed to what most people did was they picked up the fancy laptop or they picked up the cool phone, and nobody had an idea of what to sell, how to sell it. Nobody had an idea of what it could really do, and just ended up talking around in circles, as opposed to talking simply about the fact of why somebody might need a pen and what they might use it for, and then building value that way.
And what'd you say to sell the pen?
It was fairly straightforward. They had a little Parker pen on the table, and I just asked the person, do you have a pen at the moment? What do you use it for? The one you have, is it working well? I mean, and the person showed me a chewed up thick biro, which was fortunate because that was genuinely the pen that they had. And then it's, how do you feel showing that to people? How will you handing it over to your clients when you're signing contracts? And yes, this was in the day where people still sign contracts with pens face to face. It's that long ago. And then from there, just established that there was an emotional reason, there was a business reason, and then the person was kind enough to me, because at the same time, this was like one of my first time pitching anything. And then they're like, yeah, okay, that's great. They took the pen and I started the role. It was real fun. It was a really, really nice time.
And like you said, that's become quite popular now. I see a lot on TikTok, people going, this is how to sell the pen. If you were to do it again now, would you change anything about the way that you sold it?
I probably would have spoke with a little bit more confidence, and I'd have a few more questions that I throw into the mix. But broadly speaking, the approach, no, it was really looking to understand if the other person had a problem, and if we agreed they had a problem, was it worth solving? And that was at its core. So the conversation piece might be a little bit different, but the core reason behind the questions would absolutely stay the same.
And that kind of leads into storytelling in sales. How can someone become a good storyteller in sales and in brand marketing? And how do you create a story that's magnetic and sticks with consumers?
Yeah, storytelling is one of the most powerful things, and it's very, very easy to get wrong in sales. And where people tend to go wrong in sales is they pick their most successful customer, or they pick someone who had the biggest transformation. But I think the key thing in storytelling in sales versus many other areas that you might use it is relatability. So are you picking somebody to be a hero of a story who is working in the role of the person that you're meeting with? Is that company a very similar company in your story to the company that you're talking to? Is the problem that they have, or is the outcome they're working towards, is there similarities? So I think from a sales perspective, what we really want to do is show that they are the hero in their own story and have them see themselves in the story. Because if you pick something which is unrelatable, people start thinking this is not for me. You think I'm going to share the biggest company I've worked with and talk about how I've done this great work with Salesforce and that's fantastic. You're talking to a little startup with 6 or 7 people. They're thinking, oh, well, this maybe isn't for me. I'm not a big tech company. I've got 7 people working here. And then that can disconnect and have people switch off. So for me, that is the key piece. The other thing which works really well in stories, particularly in sales, is if you mention the fact that you're going to talk about a certain story, and if you are going to share more information about it, do it at the beginning and then tease it, and then at the end complete the story. Because then throughout the meeting, people in the background are thinking, I want to know what happened, I wonder what it was. And then when you get to the end, they tend to remember those stories a little bit longer because they were thinking about it so much when you were together. And the key thing with your stories in sales is nobody remembers your demo. They might remember 1 or 2 things that you shared with them, but when they're speaking to other people in the company or peers about whether they should buy this or not, they will share the story that you've shared with them. And that's where you want it to be similar to them and memorable. From there, keeping it and not having too many stories. Really, that's another thing. Again, things get mixed up, people get confused.
So when you're trying to make yourself or your company or your product become seen, is that what you should focus on first, storytelling, or the consumer or the product, the founder?
I guess when you think about trying to become seen, that means different things for different people. And if you are looking at it from a marketing perspective, and you want more people, you want to grab people's attention, from a marketing perspective, you share the biggest and the best transformation and the most eye-catching thing that your business has done, because that draws them in for that split second. And then the detail is what gets them to stay and click a link or book a meeting or whatever. So from that perspective, that's where we want to be a little bit outlandish in some respects. And then if we're in the sales process, then it's a little bit more focused, a little bit more relatable. But ultimately, the big thing that we're seeing now is people who are looking to make a personal brand along with a business. Daniel Priestley is someone who does this really well, and he believes every company should have a key person of influence, and it's really their job to get the company seen, because people are followed more than brands these days, and that is something which I suppose it's another avenue, but definitely something for people to be considering, no matter how big or small their company or business is.
And do you think people should then focus on first building up a personal brand before they start having a company, because then they'll have a platform to launch it on, or do it simultaneously or afterwards?
I think we've reached a point now where everybody should just be building a personal brand regardless. And that is something which is helped if you know that you're going to work in a certain role. So if you know you're going to be a marketer, if you know you're going to work in sales, or if you know you're going to work in product development, it's a bit easier. If you know you're going to stay and work in a certain industry, again, it's a bit easier because you can be talking about that. But even if you're not, putting yourself out there, sharing your opinions, sharing your stories, going on podcasts, all of these things are really, really big, because you don't know what opportunity is going to come from being seen. And that is really a key piece, because I think we're going to get to a point in the not too distant future where people's social media following is really going to dictate if they're going to get jobs or not, particularly in sales and marketing. Because if I can hire 2 people and both are showing enough sales skills, but one person has 10 or 15,000 followers on LinkedIn, well, this is the person I should hire, because they can bring in more potential opportunities themselves versus the person without. So to be seen is now crucially important. And the good news is it's something that any of us can do, but that's also the bad news, because anybody can do it. A lot of people are doing it, but the key then is to do it well. And I suppose a key differentiator for me is it's not about becoming an influencer. It's not about sharing everything that's happening in your life. That's a perfectly good way to do it if you are going down that track. But from a business perspective, it's putting the spotlight on the problems and the challenges that people have and what people are doing to overcome them. And then you can even just look to spotlight what other people are doing and help get that across to more people. And that can be a really nice way to do it, because it doesn't necessarily have to be all about me, all about what I'm doing. It can be about what other people are doing. And if that helps others and builds your following, I think that's a really nice way to do it.
And if you don't have any followers or any type of platform to start off with, how would you get from 0 to the first, say, 1,000 followers? Because you have quite a big following on LinkedIn, platforms like that. How did you grow that initially?
So on LinkedIn, it comes down to 2 things. One is being brave enough to comment, and that is probably the biggest. If you look at the amount of following or the amount of times you get seen these days, it's nearly 50-50 between your posts and your comments. So going onto other people's comments and being very positive or very negative. If you don't agree with something, you can respectfully call out that I don't think that is right. I think you should be doing this instead. Or it can be very positive. This is a really, really great post, but it's actually missing X, Y, or Z. This would be really great from a leadership perspective. That in itself really helps build things up, because that engagement then sparks more debate. And particularly on LinkedIn, you don't get to see all the posts in chronological order. You get to see the posts which have had the most likes or most engagement, and they tend to show the ones which are a little bit real and more than just nice posts, well done, something which is considered, and you can tell, we can still tell what's a human post and what's not at the moment. And the other side of it then is just being consistent and showing up and posting regularly, commenting regularly, and not being upset if you don't have if you've got a small following. It's one of these things where if you had all those people in a room, you'll be thinking something completely different. And yeah, it's just about starting. And most people, I think it's still, the stat is still 99% of people don't post on LinkedIn. So that one in particular is one where you can go and build a following if you're just brave enough to go and put a message out there. And I saw Gary Vee talking about this recently, where I think there was a drink called Ocean Spray, and somebody was maybe surfing and drinking some of it, and they posted a video, and then the video went completely viral and sold out Ocean Spray all across the board. So now there actually is the potential for your one post to bring a lot of people and bring a lot of attention to you that can open up the doors of a tremendous amount of opportunities. It's hard to do. A lot of people don't like doing it, but if you can get past that, the reward can be really good on the other side.
And do you think you should post consistently across a bunch of different platforms, or just focus on one, like just LinkedIn or just TikTok, and just focus on growing your audience there?
It really comes down to what you want to do. For me, I focus mainly on posting on LinkedIn and going down that avenue. I have used some of the other platforms and they're pretty good, but really it's about where your tribe is and where people are that you want to potentially engage with. And for me, most CROs, most sales leaders of big organizations are on LinkedIn. And so that's where I will focus my time, because they are the people I serve. They are the people I help. When I'm speaking when I'm doing keynote speaking or doing sales kickoffs, fewer of those are on other platforms, or if they are, it's harder to tell who might be a sales leader versus not. Really, it probably more comes down to picking the platform that you like the most, that you enjoy, and then going and doing just putting content out there, which is not an easy thing to do.
And just to wrap this up, the scene is yours. Is there anything else that you want to share that we haven't gotten into today?
The big thing I'd like to share with people is preparation pays off. So whether you're going in to sell, whether you're looking to market to people, whether you're looking to start a business, if you can make sure that you're prepared for those moments that matter, you're going to have a lot more success. If you want to find out a little bit about how you can do that, you can check out workbeforethework.com, and a lot of resources there, or connect with me on LinkedIn, Paul Caffrey. Should be easy enough to find. And Kaya, I have to say, some really insightful questions. I've really enjoyed the interview. You were yourself extremely prepared, so absolutely tip my cap to you, and thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you. It's been a great interview. Well, that's a wrap.